probably wouldn't have wanted to put them to that. And that's either, and that doesn't necessarily just family, it's team members. We get some of them here. It's other people who have bet on us that we've let down. I think that would have been another one that would have caused me to shy away. It definitely wouldn't have been the sleepless nights. It wouldn't have been, the worrying about having a payroll. That's just not a big deal. I mean, it's stressful, but that's life. It probably for me, because I'm a people, as much as I don't like being sociable, I do care about people, and that's probably the thing that really would have kept me out of it.
So thank you for being so straight about that. So given what you just said, which was, I'm not sure I would have done it, I was actually going to ask this later, but since you touched on it, what would you say to the loved ones or the family of or the people who live in and amongst entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs about what to expect if they're going to sign up for this ride with you?
I probably think the hardest thing is the feeling of being lied to. There's a trust in every relationship, and I don't know of many entrepreneurs that haven't had a time when they walked a very fine line with how much truth they shared at home. The intent was not to lie, but maybe to try and protect somebody from all the other stress that they're carrying and all the things that could go wrong. But to the receiver who didn't get those data points, it's lying. So I think if I was making a comment to somebody who has the misfortune of being married to an entrepreneur, I think it's really coming to grips with the fact that it is a lonely life on both sides of that relationship. And I don't know that there's a great way of breaking that divide, because they're each there for a reason. But I would say that would be my number one thing, is be ready for the fact that there's a lot of times where you're supporting somebody blindly and you think you have enough information to support them. And then you find out later that they maybe went a little further out on the limb than you would have wanted. But again, that's why they're the entrepreneur and you're not. So it's tough to judge, but it is very unsettling. And I would say that's probably the piece. Just what you expect in a business class, isn't it?
What's that?
Just what you expect in a business
Well, I think,
class.
I think one of the, just for people who may not have been here, my recollection is one of the impetuses for this particular session was talking about Brad and Judy and others have been here kind of sharing a lot of things. But it was really this question of, are you really up for this? Do you really want to do this? So I appreciate you being so honest and giving a look behind the curtain. I think that was also part of the announcement for this, so thank you for that. Another question for you, Steff, and I promise I'm going to give you a chance to talk about successes. We often talk about our finest moments. What stands out to you is one of your least fine?
Well, that's a pretty good list.
If you
I don't know
had
how to
just pick
prioritize
one.
that when I get to the top one. I think probably I've never thought about that, so it's really interesting to see where your brain goes and what pops in.
You mean my brain or your brain?
Mine.
Okay.
And I actually think, for what little brain there is there, it actually jumped to a engagement with a client where I was at a client site, and I allowed the client to get my goat, and I rose to the occasion. Okay. And I was really disappointed in myself that I had allowed that situation to escalate like that. I knew the client, I knew their personality style, I knew exactly how they played the game. But I wasn't in control enough to not to get sucked into. And that's the one that kind of floated me with that.
And so from the perspective of, again, we're here talking about entrepreneurship, so what? We all have bad days.
It didn't show the professionalism to my teammates that I want to represent. I would have been very disappointed if I was in that room and I watched one of them get sucked into that and rise to the occasion. So I felt I had to really let the team down by basically setting a very bad example of how to engage in that situation. And there was really no excuse for it. I just let it get out of hand. So from that standpoint, I did not think I represented our team well. I did have a couple teammates in the meeting with me. They weren't as freaked out by it as I was. But it's not something I would have ever wanted to show in public, because it's just, there's no good reason. I mean, to me, the best business decisions, you know, you can sleep the best in your business decision if you would make it regardless of who knew about it. So it's easy to make a decision when nobody's going to know you made the decision. But if you make a decision, whether somebody's there to observe you or not, whether anybody's ever going to know you made that decision or not, but you're always making it for the public eye, how would I like this to be out in the public eye? Whether it be you're talking about somebody, whether you're making a business decision, whatever it is, it really changes how you approach things. And so that's a standard I try and hold myself to. I don't very rarely accomplish it. But again, yeah, so that would be mine.
There's a quote that comes to mind, which is, "You are who you are when nobody's watching." Kind of comes to mind.
Yeah, I think your business becomes that.
Yeah.
You know, I look at the Envisage team, and one of the core things is, you know, as long as you make a decision based on our 3 guiding principles, you'll never be wrong. I might not make the same decision, but that doesn't matter. You make the decision based on your judgment around these 3 guiding principles, and that's what we expect you to do.
Can you just, for people who, what are those principles, Steff?
Yeah, is it right for the client? Is it right for the team, your teammates, and is it right for the company? And the order is done very purposefully. It's always a balancing act between all 3, because they compete with each other all the time. So you can't do everything for the client without ever paying attention to your teammates. Otherwise, you'll have no teammates. And you can't take care of your teammates exclusively without paying attention to the finances of the company. Otherwise, you'll have no company. So it's like a 3-arm scale. You're always trying to balance. And our team members are really asked to be very comfortable taking accountability and responsibility with nobody's around, and they have to make a decision. Doesn't matter what the decision is. They have to do it. They take those 3 things into consideration, and nobody's ever going to fault what their decision was. So that's what I'm talking about.
So I have my phone up here just for people who are wondering, just to try to be mindful of time. I want to ask you one other kind of question related to what you learned, and then we'll kind of move into a couple of more lighthearted questions. Okay?
These are light.
This one might not be. So in some, and just forgive me if you'll just listen to this, in some primitive tribes, the shaman, the keeper of wisdom and magic and healing, could only become the shaman if he was wounded. It is believed that it was through this wound that his powerful wisdom had entered. It's no accident that our scars are made of the strongest tissue in our bodies, even though they may be the result of deep injury. What scar do you have from your Envisage journey, and what wisdom does it hold?
I don't know if I'd call it scar from my Envisage journey. I got
Okay.
baggage from before Envisage
Okay.
that caused me to do things in Envisage.
Go for it.
No, that wasn't your question. You can't expand. Within Envisage, it was really learning the patience of the long game. As people who are here that work with me at Envisage will tell you that I spend a lot of time planting seeds that may take 3 years to grow. And I'm very, very patient with cultivating and growing those seeds. There aren't many people who have that level of patience in running a business. And good news, bad news, right? For those people who would like things to move faster, it is very painful, and they're sick and tired. But in the end, what you end up with is an extremely strong and resilient business. and a lot of people who are very committed to making that business stay successful, and a lot of customers who are committed to making that business stay successful. But it's a very patient, long game. So for me, I think the thing, the scars is not being patient enough early on, or watching places where I push things too fast because I saw what was needed in 6, 8 months or a year, and I pushed them now. And it was like trying to force a plant to grow that's not ready to grow. You end up with something that's tall and weedy and falls over the first time the wind blows. It's got to have enough time to grow roots, and be stable. And if you push it faster than that, the damage is really bad. So I'd say that's the scar of it.
So let's talk a little bit about, you touched on, you sort of got into Envisage a little bit. And I don't have the data and the statistics in front of me, but sort of defied the odds a little bit, 20 plus 25 years in business. If you had to say, what do you see that's been kind of the single biggest contributor to the success that Envisage has had?
Nobody came along to take it off my hands when I would have given it away if you just took the debt. And that sounds funny, but it's the absolute truth. There were so many times where if somebody had just been willing to take this mess away from me, out of my family, and free us, I would have walked away for zero. Just take the debt. I was very blessed. Nobody walked in at the right time. And I was stuck with this thing that was an ugly child. Nobody wanted it until the right set of circumstances came along and we were able to capitalize on all the good everybody's done for 20 years. But that, definitely, if somebody come along during any one of those dark periods, and we had several of them, I wouldn't be sitting here on the stage talking about, how to build a cornfield company.
So if you had to kind of break it down, what was it about that made it successful? Like,
what about those dark days?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because nobody showed up, I was stuck with it. And I feel guilty about not taking care of people who are committed to me.
Okay.
So therefore, I wasn't going to leave our employees hanging. And I wasn't going to leave our customers hanging. So therefore, we're just going to pick one foot up in front of the other and somehow get through this. So if somebody showed up, I wouldn't be sitting here.
So it sounds like, you didn't say this, but this sense of a bigger commitment to the people that were counting on you to not let things fall apart.
Yeah, there's no question. Commitment to the people, commitment to the customers, and commitment to the North Star. Like during those dark days, part of the reason why nobody showed up is, without me knowing it, I had a sign around my neck that says, unless you're going to help me get to my North Star, don't bother showing up. Right? So that North Star came right back into it and said, okay, so like I had an opportunity early 90s. We were probably 7, 8 consulting people, shut the company down. We were doing most of our work for one client. They offered me a job to run their IT center. Nice global IT organization. I would have had more time with my family, theoretically, because it was local. Nice title, a lot more money, because I didn't make any money back then. And all this group of people already employed to go do what we want to do. My North Star kept me from picking that. So that's a place where that North Star really kicks in. Because that was the much easier choice and would have had much more short-term success, and to the outside world would look a lot more successful. But I couldn't see how I could get to my North Star and make that choice. So, we figured we'd just keep slogging it out.
So I want to sort of transition a little bit more and kind of bring this, sort of bring it into the room and maybe kind of contextualize things a little bit for this audience. So I have a very general question, but one thing that I wanted to ask you about, I have heard that you've recruited talent from the grocery store. So I'm just curious, and I don't know the answer to this. I'm curious, what other unconventional ways have you managed to find talent? And I think particularly in this region where maybe there's a story that it's harder to come by.
Oh, I look for talent in every interaction I have. I don't care where it is. I'm looking for people who can think. I'm looking for people who can problem solve. I'm looking for people who can set their egos aside and work as a team. Our company is built around teams, not superstars. So there's some companies that are built around superstars that have been very successful. So I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong. But for our company, it's team. And superstars don't succeed in our company, no matter how good they are, what they do, because fundamentally we're a team-based company. So I don't care where I am. If I see somebody giving great customer service, if I see somebody thinking on their feet, problem solving. I mean, I was down at Lowe's last year. I asked somebody to fix a lock. Well, we can't do that. That person's not here. Some other kid shows up. Said, oh yeah, they taught me how to do that last week. I'm happy to take the time to do it. That kid was on my recruit list. And he ended up with an internship at the business. Yeah, I recruit anywhere. It's the people, how they think, how they process, how they treat each other. That's what I'm recruiting. Everything else you can learn. But that's your internal drive, that's your instinct, that's your ethics and your ethos. You can't teach that. It's either in you or it's not. At least I'm not a teacher, so I don't know how to teach it. Somebody might be able to, but I can't. So you either come with it, or we're never going to have it.
Reminded of that, sorry, I'm a little bit of a junkie with theories and whatnot, but I'm reminded of the great article years ago about hire for attitude, train for skill, right? So it sounds like your experience making the grocery store and Lowe's, was there something that you noticed and it really stood out for you?
Yeah, you are correct. I did hire out of a grocery store,
yeah.
And the person's been with us probably almost as long as I have.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
One of the other questions, and in preparing for this, talking with Judy Cherry a little bit, so this is kind of moving into making it a little more contextualized for this audience. So while Southern Tier Startup Alliance is focused on the Southern Tier, tonight we're in Schuyler County. So I know Dennis Fagan and John King. Hopefully you guys can probably correct me if I'm misspeaking here. But we are, I think, known as the northernmost, or one of the northernmost counties in Appalachia. What I understand from Judy is that maybe some people think that only agriculture, tourism, and seasonal businesses are sustainable. So what do you say to those who might hold those beliefs?
I guess we have this with Envisage. We have a lot of people come in and make judgment about us, especially when we were in the Cornfield. Like, how can you get talent? Why would anybody, why don't they go someplace else? I mean, how many other places do you have a feeder system like we have? Binghamton University, Cornell, Ithaca College, Syracuse, Rochester. And we've got a phenomenal feeder system up here. And then, as you and I were talking, you have the second shot at the feeder system, which is the people who leave to big, better places, the West Coast, wherever, until they start their families. And once they start their families, they're like, wow, I kind of would like to be in this other, more rural climate. I'd like to be in this other place rather than the big city to raise my kids. So now we have a second shot at recruiting people. So for me, I'm always looking at, we're in the catbirds of having really good talent. So we've got the universities turning out a lot of talent. We still have what I would say kind of the Midwest farm ethic, which is let's just grit through this and make it work. Not a lot of show and flash. And so to me, why wouldn't I want that in a business? And that to me is an upstate, just like out in the Midwest, it's an upstate ethos. I mean, anybody who puts up with these winners has got to be somebody who says, I'm here for some other reason, right? Or I love skiing, or I love whatever. But yeah, so from my standpoint, we do get this kind of question all the time, and we got it a lot when different investors would come calling to see if they, whether or not we were something they were interested in. It's like, oh, how can you guys recruit? How can you build staff? And then we have some really great training fields, right? We have IBM, right? We've got a ton of people working in Envisage that are ex-IBMers. I could never afford to train them the way IBM did. And these are people who have already been through the career path, they've been through the climb the mountain, they just want a job where they can enjoy what they do and they can share their wisdom with other people who are coming along behind them. Yeah, what better employee would you want? They're not going to compete for the climb to the top. They just want to share and support. Lockheed Martin, right? Lockheed Martin